The world had seen many battles, but few could match the sheer devastation that was about to unfold. Two monsters of pure, unrelenting destruction were on a collision course. One, an avatar of unstoppable motion. The other, a living embodiment of evolution and rage. This was not a battle for glory, nor for conquest. It was a battle written in destruction itself. Deep in the cold vastness of space, a derelict Kryptonian warship drifted lifelessly, its hull scarred from an ancient war. Inside, among shattered remains of failed experiments and abandoned technologies, lay something that should never have been found. A husk of death encased in a reinforced stasis pod, barely pulsing with life. It had been discarded by the universe itself, sealed away in hopes that it would never rise again. But the void is cruel. A passing asteroid struck the warship, tearing through its rusted hull, exposing it to the raw chaos of space. Alarms flared to life, and the ship's emergency protocols, designed by long-dead Kryptonian scientists, made a fatal mistake. They reactivated their greatest failure. Doomsday's eyes snapped open, a guttural roar, one that sent tremors through the ship's fractured frame, shattered the last remaining locks on his containment. He did not remember how long he had been asleep. He did not care. All he knew was hunger, the insatiable drive to destroy, to kill, to rip apart anything that dared to exist in his presence. With a single punch, he breached the ship's hull. The vacuum of space rushed to claim him, but he did not need air, did not need sustenance. He was beyond such things. He drifted toward the nearest gravitational force, pulled by fate itself, Earth. Meanwhile, across the universe's cold expanse, on the chaotic streets of New York, Cain Marko sat in a dimly lit bar, nursing a drink far too small for his massive hands. The Juggernaut. Few in the world could claim true invincibility, but he was one of them. Gifted or cursed, depending on perspective, with the power of Ceterac, he was a living force of destruction. No army, no wall, no cosmic might had ever truly stopped him once he started moving. Yet Cain was at a crossroads. He had been a villain, a conqueror, a force of nature. But for what? He had crushed buildings, torn through heroes, even defied gods. And yet here he was, drinking alone, feeling the weight of battles that had no purpose. His path had been one of raw destruction, but what did he have to show for it? As he stared at his reflection in the murky glass, an unsettling feeling crawled over him. A deep, gut-wrenching sensation that sent shivers down his spine. It wasn't fear. He had long since abandoned such mortal weaknesses. It was something far worse. The bar shook violently. Windows shattered. The entire block quaked, as if the earth itself was screaming. Cain stood, his massive frame towering over the cowering patrons. The scent of burning asphalt filled the air. Outside, the sky burned red. A streak of fire, like a comet of pure death, was crashing from the heavens. It wasn't a meteor. It wasn't some alien spaceship. It was something far worse. It was Doomsday. The impact was catastrophic. A shockwave spread across the city, toppling buildings and splitting streets apart. Smoke and fire engulfed the ruins as civilians fled in terror. And from the wreckage, standing amidst the carnage, was a monster made of nightmare. Doomsday's crimson eyes burned like molten hatred. His thick, bone-plated body pulsed with raw, unrelenting power. He took a single step forward, and the street beneath him cracked like glass. Then another step, and another, each movement carrying the promise of annihilation. Cain stepped out of the bar, fists clenched. His instincts screamed at him. This thing wasn't just here to destroy. It was here to erase, to wipe out everything in its path. And he knew deep down that nothing could stop it. Nothing except him. He rolled his neck, letting out a slow breath. His time for questions, for doubt, for reflection was over. If there was one thing in existence that could truly put his power to the test, it was this creature. He planted his foot forward. The moment he did, the very air between them seemed to crackle with tension. Doomsday turned his head slightly, his bestial mind registering the presence of a worthy foe. His lips curled into something resembling a snarl. And in that moment, Cain Marko, the Juggernaut, did what he was born to do. He charged. The ground trembled beneath him. The air itself warped as his unstoppable momentum ignited. Every atom in his being focused into a singular purpose: forward. Doomsday did not flinch. He welcomed the challenge. With a monstrous roar, he lunged forward, matching Juggernaut's fury with his own. Two forces, both deemed unmovable, both deemed unstoppable, racing toward each other at terrifying speed. And when they met, the world itself would shake. The streets of New York had become a war zone. As Juggernaut charged forward, his massive form ripped through the wreckage like a living battering ram. Every step sent tremors through the earth. His momentum, a force of nature that had never been truly stopped. Doomsday met him head-on. The impact was cataclysmic. A shockwave exploded outward, shattering glass across the city and sending cars flying like toys. Buildings buckled under the force as the two titans collided, neither giving an inch. Juggernaut's unstoppable force crashed against Doomsday's unyielding resilience in a battle that defied all logic. Juggernaut roared, pushing forward with all the might Sitarak had bestowed upon him. His fists, massive and indestructible, hammered into Doomsday's hide, each blow capable of reducing mountains to rubble. But Doomsday, he did not fall. He absorbed the hits, his body adapting, thickening where it needed to, resisting where it had to. He countered with a strike of his own, a clawed hand slashing across Juggernaut's chest, sending sparks flying as bone met enchanted armor. Cain staggered back, not from pain, but from surprise. Nothing had ever withstood his charge so perfectly before. Doomsday wasted no time. He pounced, his massive frame moving with terrifying speed. His fists, like wrecking balls, crashed into Juggernaut's helmet, sending him hurtling through the air. Cain smashed through two buildings before landing in the middle of the street, asphalt cratering beneath him. For the first time in years, Juggernaut felt something close to doubt. This thing wasn't just strong, it was relentless. Juggernaut rose, shaking the dust off his shoulders, his crimson aura flaring. "All right, ugly," he growled. "Round two." He charged again, faster this time, pouring everything into his attack. The ground behind him cracked as his unstoppable force reached its peak. But Doomsday had learned. This time, instead of taking the hit, he dodged at the last second. Juggernaut tore through a skyscraper, reducing it to rubble, and in that instant, before he could recover, Doomsday struck. A devastating uppercut lifted Juggernaut off his feet, sending him into the sky. Before he could land, Doomsday leapt, grabbing him mid-air and slamming him down with all his might. The impact formed a crater the size of a city block, smoke and debris rising like a mushroom cloud. For the first time in his existence, Juggernaut felt something unfamiliar. Pain. His body, enchanted beyond mortal means, had never known true damage. But this thing, it could hurt him. He clenched his fists, shaking off the sensation. "I don't stop," he muttered, forcing himself up. "I never stop." Cain roared and charged again, determined to prove his title. But Doomsday was adapting, faster than any foe Juggernaut had ever faced. He sidestepped the charge once more, grabbing Cain's helmet and twisting with monstrous strength. A sickening crack echoed through the battlefield. Juggernaut's helmet, his symbol, his protection, shattered. Cain Marko staggered back, disoriented. His power remained, but for the first time in ages, he felt vulnerable. Doomsday did not hesitate. A punch struck Cain in the gut, bending even his indestructible form. Another crashed into his face, sending him flying into a wrecked train. Metal twisted like paper as Juggernaut groaned, struggling to rise. Doomsday walked forward, relentless, merciless. He grabbed Cain by the throat, lifting him like a rag doll. And then he squeezed. For the first time, Juggernaut's breath caught. His indomitable will wavered. Doomsday was crushing him, his spine creaking under the pressure. Cain swung desperately, landing a punch that sent Doomsday skidding back. He stumbled to his feet, panting. But Doomsday was already charging again, and this time Juggernaut could not stop him. The final blow was devastating. Doomsday grabbed Cain and drove him headfirst into the earth. The ground split apart, swallowing Juggernaut whole. A massive explosion of dust and debris rose, as Doomsday buried his foe beneath the city itself. For long moments, silence reigned. Then Doomsday emerged from the smoke, his body pulsing with newfound strength. Juggernaut did not rise. Beneath the rubble, Cain Marko lay motionless. His body still held its power, but his will, his greatest weapon, was broken. For the first time, the unstoppable force had been stopped. Doomsday let out a victorious roar, his eyes burning with triumph. He had evolved past even this challenge, and as the beast turned his gaze toward the rest of the city, it was clear this war was not over. It had only just begun.